Hey guys, this is Jonathan Thorpe, commercial portrait photographer from Washington, D.C. Today we're at the Sunderland Bell Foundry in Ruther Glen, Virginia to shoot some portraits of Ben, the owner. We're going to do some kind of cool lighting and really try to evoke a mood and a feel in these photos. And we're going to show the difference between just straight up natural ambient light and then how to kind of create a really cool and moody scene using different types of strobes and maybe some gels and some fog and whatever else we have, in the camera bag today. It should be a pretty cool, informative process. I hope you guys enjoy. Check it out. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do today is a portrait of him at this giant lathe over here behind me. You said it's a 12-ton lathe? 12-ton lathe. This is how they actually, this is how you tune them, right? Yep. This is how they tune the bell. So they'll put the bell in there and shave off the metal to get the right tone or pitch or whatever to the bell. We're gonna start the portrait shooting with just natural ambient light. We're gonna just use the available light here in the foundry and see what we get from that first. And then we'll start building up lights one by one. I don't know how many lights exactly just yet. It might end up just being 2. We might get to 3. But we're gonna see how much of a huge difference it can make adding just a couple lights, even one light into a portrait when you're working with just available light instead. So the cool thing about using the lights in a shot like this is it's gonna bring out all that richness and kind of texture and grime in the metal in the shot. So we'll do our shot with just the ambient. We'll take a look at that. And then we'll start to build up our lights one by one. We're gonna start with just the ambient light shot. So this is our available light in our photo, which actually isn't too bad. It's actually a pretty decent amount of natural light in here. But for me, I don't really know how to use natural light. As I've said numerous times in my career, natural light terrifies me. I always go into every shoot knowing that I'm gonna have a ton of strobes with me. I started my career out with strobes. I don't know how to really do a natural light photo. So for me, coming in here without a strobe would be just a terrifying, terrifying shoot. So the fact that I get to come in here and then start building up these lights, it's gonna really kind of hit home this whole cinematic portrait thing that I love doing in my work. So we'll start with just our ambient light shot. I'm gonna shoot a fair amount of these here until we get where we wanna be. That looks good, hold that for me. All right, that looks good. All right, so as you guys can see, like the portrait's not bad. It's a little dark, it's a little shadowy. We're only dealing with the overhead lights in the shot, and we have a little bit of spill from an open garage door in the back. So now we'll start to bring in those lights and really kind of bring this scene to life in a sense, and start to really pay attention to lighting individual parts of the photo as opposed to just dealing with just the ambient light. All right, so we're gonna start with our lighting. Now, something that I really like to do, and I've done for a very long time now, is lighting back to front. That means I'm not gonna introduce a key light into the last portion of getting everything set up. So right now I have 2 lights on stands. We're shooting today with the Westcott FJ400 strobes. And for my lens, I'm shooting on the Tamron 45 1.8, one of my favorite lenses for this type of work, in a sense because you see enough of the background that it helps tell the narrative, but you also don't lose your subject in the background. It's just enough room around the subject to really give it a good, it really kind of grounds the portrait where it needs to be. So the first light I'm actually gonna set up is gonna be the background light of all things. And the reason I do that is kind of like a painting to me. I build in layers from back to front as opposed to doing the key light first. And that's something that I think I learned from my mom. She was a painter, And you know, growing up, I was always around painting, and that's just something that you did, and I kind of just let that translate into photography. So we're gonna set this up over his shoulder. I don't know if you guys can see it from there, but we notice we have a warming gel on the light here, and this is gonna give him like a really warm, kind of glowing tone to the portrait. All right. Cool, that looks good. All right, cool. So we got our first light set up. This is our background light. This is also our rim light and our kicker. That's gonna be on its own group, group B. We're gonna do our test shots with that light first, as opposed to that key light. So go ahead and you're getting your spot one more time for me, and we'll see what this looks like here. Now we gotta turn this down. All right. Cool. All right, so you can see in this shot, that light is really kind of hitting home this whole like warm, industrial, the molten feel, the whole thing, you know? I'm gonna bring it up a little bit brighter. It's a little dull. So right now it's at 3.1, whatever that power setting really means. We're gonna go to a 4.3 on that and start from there. And that should give us a nice, really cool, kind of warm, hot glow, as you guys can see in the shot. Cool, so that looks good so far, and I'll go ahead and start setting up the key light next. Setting up our key light. Our key light's gonna be another Westcott FJ400 on a beauty dish. I use the beauty dish a lot just because it's a small modifier, and something I'd really like to do is I wanna get this as close as I can to my subject. The closer that you can get your modifiers in, the more you see the effect of that modifier, and it's a really important thing to do because we're gonna use these modifiers for a reason. So the closer in that we can get them, the more we're starting to see those reasons why we're choosing the modifiers that we choose. So that's probably pretty good there. We'll go ahead and get this power set. I don't know, start at 5. And see what we got. Awesome. That's looking pretty good. It's a little hot, so we're gonna turn that key light down to 4. And we'll see what we got here. Cool. And that's kind of our, honestly, our finished product on that shot. I may add another light behind. I think I will, behind the lathe, because if you see the shot, we're getting a little bit of shadow on the left side of the bell. And I wanna make sure we can see a little bit more of that. So let's get another light set up. We'll put that in the back. That'll be coming kind of at his right shoulder, and that'll help bring up the glow of that bell behind him. So Ben stepped away for a second just to put his dog away. But I'm gonna set up another light back behind the lathe. And this is gonna come through it and help light the side of that bell. So let's see if we can get behind this thing. All right, so we got that set up, and that's just gonna peek through. There's a little window on the side of the lathe that light's gonna spill through. That's also in its own group. It's in group C, so everything has its own individual power setting. We'll go ahead and we're gonna set that pretty low because that's gonna be a big blast of power and we don't wanna overpower the shot. We're gonna go down to 3.5 and let's see what we got now. And you see it adds just a little touch of light to the bell and it helps kind of define the shape of it, which is a really important part of a shot like this, you know? Let's do some more. Another thing I do a lot, guys, is I shoot from a low angle up. And it's for a few reasons. I'm pretty tall, so this is a different perspective that I generally don't get to see. It's also kind of like the hero shot, right? And it makes them look a little bit larger than life. Kind of sells the location a little bit differently and kind of, I don't know, just makes them stand out even that much more. And we're using such dramatic lighting like this, it's kind of cool to put them in a quote unquote like superhero looking position. Awesome. I think we're good on that portrait, and we'll move on to the next shot. Okay, so our next shot is going to be a more full body portrait in the entirety of the facility. As you can see, we see all the bells, we see like the molds and all this other stuff going on. So we want to be able to show all that off and really kind of ground the portrait in the location that we're doing it in. The light is going to change a little bit different this time. We're going to have our key light still with the beauty dish, and that's just going to be more focused on his face. We're also going to do a giant parabolic for a fill, and that'll fill in some shadows on his chest and on his body. And then we're going to put a light behind him aimed right at his back, which is going to give us a really cool shadow to camera. And it gives us really neat dynamic portrait. So let's start setting that up and we'll see how it turns out. So the parabolic is a giant umbrella that's reflective, which means we're going to shoot the light into it and then it's going to bounce out. We're going to use a diffusion panel on it, so it's going to keep the light really, really soft and doesn't have a super hard contrasty punch. That contrast and that punch we're going to get from the beauty dish. So this is honestly just, we're going to try to get the room almost pitch black with the exposure and then fill in the shadows with things like the parabolic and the beauty dish over there. So got a little mini stand back here, and that will go behind. We'll put it over here actually. And we're going to just block that light with his body when we're shooting. So I'm also switching lenses. I'm going to go to the Tamron 35 1.4 this time, so I want a little bit wider than that 45. I want to see some more of the space that we're shooting in. So I'm going to turn off my other two lights here and just see what the background light is looking like. You are taller than I thought you were. I should know my own kind. All right, let's try that one more time. So I'm shooting with trying to get the background pretty much killed in the exposure. There we go. So we're going to bring it down just a touch more. There we go. Let's take a look at this one. Hey, Jesse, you're in the shot. No problem. All right, let's take a look at our shot. So we see we have that cool shadow coming straight to the camera. We have a little bit of wrapping light around him, which is nice, and that's going to help carve him out of that background. And next thing we're going to do is going to introduce the parabolic. That's going to bring up his shadows just a touch more. And we'll then introduce the beauty dish and see where we're at from there. All right, so this light, the parabolic, is going to be a really, honestly, you're not even going to tell it's happening in the shot, but it's just going to help bring up the shadows a little bit so I can keep my ISO nice and low. I'm at 1/320th of a second at f2. Really want to try to make this background blur out as much as we can, so it just helps him stand off even more. That's looking great. So we have our shadows brought up. Next light is going to be that key light, which is going to be the beauty dish. And that'll bring up the face, and we should be kind of set from there. After we do all this stuff, we're going to take an ambient light exposure, and we'll do another comparison between the two. As you can see, he starts to kind of almost glow in the light that we're doing. He stands off the background really well. In post, I might bring up the shadows just a touch more. But this is kind of showing him as a portrait, environmental portrait at that, helping him stand off the background, but still kind of emphasizing the whole environment that we're shooting in. That looks great. Excellent. Awesome, that looks great. So now that we have those all set, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take an exposure without any lights, but maintaining my camera settings so you can see what it looks like without the flashes going off at all. You can see how dark the scene really is. And now I'll get my settings dialed in so it's a more, ambient exposure of just the light that's in the warehouse here, in the foundry here. And we can see all the difference between them. You can see in the ambient light shot, the location looks okay because we're getting all that beautiful light from the garage doors and whatnot. But he's also really shaded and really dark, so we're filling in those shadows with our light. The other exposure without the flashes firing with the same camera settings is almost completely pitch black. We're seeing a little bit of light coming in from that garage door. We're seeing a little bit of light overhead, but otherwise it's a pretty much dark scene. And finally, when our strobes are going off, we see a little bit of light behind him still that's coming straight to camera. We have that light above that's lighting his face and giving a really rich, contrasty punch. And then we're having our parabolic just kind of fill in those shadows and just bring up his entire exposure without, spilling too much around the foundry. And it really creates a pretty beautiful, cinematic, deep, rich, kind of contrasty portrait when it's all done. So while walking the grounds out here, we came upon all these bell flasks. Now these are used to make the molds to then make the bells. Is that fair enough? Okay. We got kind of lucky today on shooting outside. I know I said, I don't shoot natural light, and I don't, but a cloudy day like this is always a perfect opportunity to shoot natural light stuff. That doesn't mean we're going to. What we're gonna do is we'll take a shot again with just natural light, and it's gonna be kind of a pretty light, but we're gonna notice something. Because he's underneath this awning, he's gonna be backlit, which means the sky is just gonna blow out. We're gonna lose all texture and detail in the sky. He'll be properly exposed and it'll look good, but we'll just get a white sky. So then we're gonna start dialing our exposure in to make that sky come out really, really moody and kind of like a storms on the horizon situation. We'll put a light on him to light him up, and we're also gonna use this giant parabolic above me to light the bells up around us so we don't lose any of that detail in the shot. And it kind of just still hits everything home. So let's start with the ambient shot here. Go, I guess you can't, never mind. That's good there. So we'll start here, I think. And as you guys can see in the shot, he's pretty properly exposed. Even has a little bit of rim light behind him from the backlit of the sky, but our sky is completely blown out, and our trees are in the back are also kind of blown out. And we want to make sure we're still getting those details. So I'm going to start dialing my exposure up using my shutter speed. Right now I'm at 1/160th of a second, f2 ISO 100. I know it's going to have to go pretty high, so I'm going to go all the way up to, let's say 4,000th of a second. And we're going to utilize high-speed sync. High-speed sync in a flash allows the flash to fire and sync with the shutter speed outside of the camera's shutter speed limit. Usually it's 1/200th or 1/250th of a second, depending on the manufacturer. So we're gonna be shooting at 1/4000th of a second, which is gonna give us a really, really cool, moody, dark sky behind him, and really kind of just hit home this really moody environmental portrait here. Cool. Now we can start to see those a little bit better. And now we'll introduce our light over top of his head, and that's gonna be our beauty dish again. Let's see what we got. It would help if it was turned on. There we go. Excellent. So you guys can see we're using a pretty simple light here. This is kind of out of my my normal realm of lighting. Are you only using 2 lights? One of those lights is only a practical light, meaning it's lighting the environment. And the key light is just a single light, and that's going to help bring out the darkness of the sky around him. I could go, you know, adding more lights, but then, you know, if I add a rim light to it, it's not going to really make sense because there's no light influence in the shot. And we want a light with purpose, right? So if there is a rim light hitting him, there would have to be something in the scene to emphasize that that light was needed. And because it's just a cloudy, dark day, there would be no sunlight or nothing else in the shot that would really emphasize the need for another light. So just having everything with one light in this situation works really, really well to help bring out the texture and the detail of the sky the way it does. We're gonna do one last portrait of the day. This is my favorite time of the shoot. Really tight, close face portrait. Show all that, you know, blood, sweat, and tears we just did working here all day. So we're gonna shoot that right now. We got 2 lights on either side, act as our rim lights, give us a nice cheekbone, nice, brings out the face details really well. Then 1 beauty dish overhead. Real simple lighting, but really, really effective look. That looks good. Pretty intense.
There it is.
We'll do one more. That looks good. Last one right here. All right. That is a wrap. So we were packing up to leave. About to film the outro of the day. And I walked past the big lathe. And the other ones were huge, and this one's, for lack of a better term, huger. So we had to get a portrait in front of this thing. I have 4 lights set up. One sitting on the, physically sitting on the lathe behind him. That's gonna light up the bottom of this, get all that really cool grungy texture. We have 2 lights on either side. Those are gonna be our rim lights. They're gonna light the side of his face, the sides of his face, and kind of give him some dimensionality. And then finally we have that beauty dish again boomed overhead. So we're gonna start from back to front like we always do. We have that backlight that's gonna fire this time. That didn't fire because I didn't turn it on. Woof! Hey, buddy. Yes, he should. All right, try that again. All right, now we're getting somewhere. That backlight, we're in a little bit of high-speed sync here. We're at 2/50th of a second at f4. We're gonna get that backlight popping real hard behind him. That looks great. So that backlight that's sitting on the lathe is just about full power. We'll introduce those side lights now. We're getting there. But yeah, probably. All right, that's looking great so far. So you can see that we're introducing those side lights kind of just carves him out of the background a little bit more and gives it, you know, some pacing and some space in the shot. Try one more here. That looks good. You guys will notice I'm looking at my viewfinder so I can see the picture a little bit better because it's a little bright out here. And finally, we're going to bring up that key light now. Let's see what we got. Cool. That'll be a wrap for the photos. Cool. I think we're done for real this time. All right, guys, so that wraps up today here at Sunderland. This has been a really fun time, really cool portraits. It's a really unique location to shoot something in. I've never been to a foundry before, let alone a bell foundry. And Sunderland is actually one of the only traditional bell foundries in the country. So that's kind of cool that it's such a local place to where I live. Thank you so much for tuning into this. I hope you guys learned something. I hope I pulled the curtain back a little bit about what it takes to do location lighting and a little bit more narrative work with a portrait setting. If you guys ever need me or want to follow me, you can check me out at jthorpephoto on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm always happy to respond. And if you have any questions, please hit me up. See you guys next time. Thanks.